Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, especially on Super Bowl Sunday, but I've been told it starts at 6:30, so we'll have you done by then. And the stars are shining, or the sun is shining on Salim, because we have great weather and there's no snowstorm. So that's a very good omen to begin with. We are so honored, of course, to have you all here, and take a moment to introduce our board members. Hassan Mahmood from Muslims Facing Tomorrow. Salim, of course, you know. Sohail Raza, and of course, I'm there as a permanent fixture. And while all of you are such special guests, I'm really thankful for our new guest, Ashish, who is who has been nominated or is running for the nomination in the Guelph area, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Good luck on that. And we also have with us a wonderful new friend, Shan Tasir, who is, I have no other way to introduce you, Shan, so forgive me. He is the son of the ex-Punjab governor of Pakistan, Salman Tasir, who was shot and killed by his bodyguard for helping Asia Bibi, who, as you know, has been freed and will probably be coming to Canada. Shan has taken up the mantle of his father. He is now working against the blasphemy law, and each and every one of us is going to stand up and support him in this cause so that we can finish the blasphemy law once and for all. So thank you for being here, Shan, and thank you everyone else. I just want to tell you how I met Salim Mansur. We had come to Canada, and I was, on television, I saw this angry young man. And he was saying all the things that we believed in. And he was saying all the things we wanted to say, but he was saying them. And I was reading his column in The Sun, and I was watching him, and I told Sohail we have to meet him. And then, of course, we met. And it has been a wonderful journey of friendship and learning with Salim Mansur, because Salim, for those of you who know him, is a wealth of knowledge. He is a historian. He is so knowledgeable that I can sit and listen to him 24 hours and still feel I haven't learned anything. And so he is a mentor, someone that I look up to anytime I need advice. And then 6 years ago, when we were forming Muslims Facing Tomorrow, the first person we wanted to reach out to was Salim Mansur, and we are so honored and blessed to have him on our board, because he is a voice of reason. He is a voice of knowledge. He is full of information. Now, to introduce Salim better than how I know him, because I, of course, come from a place of emotion, I'm going to ask Irving, a very good friend and supporter of Salim, to say a few words. And I'm sure you won't be echoing.
I'm not sure. Hi, everyone.
Okay, one second. Oh. Sorry. Yes.
Oh.
Everyone who speaks has to have this little.
Right?
Allow me the honor of doing
Sure. Do we need this as well?
Yes.
The other way around.
The other way around?
Like it is.
Okay. No, you need the bud facing him, right?
Right, but I'm all tangled up.
There,
It's okay.
there, okay.
Okay, if I don't...
Yes, and this.
Do I need this too?
Yes, excuse me.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Okay.
You don't have to dance, it's okay.
Okay.
If you stand behind the speaker, it might be better.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to give a little more of a formal introduction, and then say a few words that are more personal. Since first arriving in Canada to escape persecution in his former homeland, Salim as a young man never looked back. To him, Canada was the land of the free. Freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to believe and worship as one pleases. Hence his choice of study and his emphasis on teaching, writing, and research in the political realm. His devotion to Canada with its traditions and values finds expression in his journalism, his lectures, writings, and books. His convictions regarding liberal democracy, pluralism, and individual liberties are at the root of his desire to conserve that which is noble and challenge that which threatens it. Dr. Mansur and his family are London ratepayers and longtime local residents, living and working in London North over 30 years, sharing in his experiences and frustrations of Londoners and all Canadians regarding the economy, taxes, jobs, and our quality of life. Equally like most Canadians, the Mansur family is concerned about the preservation of our national identity, sovereignty, and security. An avid supporter of basic human rights and the equality of all before the law, Salim is a vocal advocate locally, nationally, and internationally for those who need a strong voice in their defense. The record of his humanitarian work and the awards he has received are a testimony to his actions as one who walks the walk and demonstrates he will represent his constituents vigorously and without compromise. As a member of the Conservative Caucus and a specialist in foreign and Middle Eastern affairs, Salim will be able to contribute substantially to many issues affecting our relations with our allies and our neighbors, as well as to the concerns about the integrity of our borders and those violating them. Compassion combined with safe practices plus merit-based choices need to be reintroduced into our immigration system, including common sense when it comes to so-called diversity and multiculturalism. Salim is both a strong fiscal and social conservative and a team player who will actively promote Andrew Scheer's agenda, policies, and platform based on conservative principles and the will of the people. The challenge in 2019 will be the greatest our party and the Canadian voter may ever have to face. I met Salim 2004, and it seems to me, looking back, that September 11th was the birthing of Salim's candidacy today. I worked with Salim in the organization called Canadians, Canadian Coalition for Democracy. It seems so long ago. And Salim was a leading voice, and to be honest with you, the first Muslim that I met and really talked to and understood, and Salim was able to present a different face of Islam to me. I'm a Toronto-born Jew, and I think, and I've introduced Salim to many of my friends in the Jewish community, and he wins them over because what he's saying is so logical. When you compare him to some of the people in Parliament today, when you compare this man to Chrystia Freeland, or for that matter, to Justin Trudeau, the difference is so glaring. Salim brings with him an understanding. He's not just a political scientist, he's a political philosopher. And he brings with him the understanding of his own background in India and Pakistan, and his desire to see Canada return to its values, maintain its values, and not be led down the road that some of the other political parties would like to lead it. So I now present you Salim Mansur, who I'm proud to call my friend.
I've known Salim's work more than I've known Salim for a long, long time. Everybody who's a staunch conservative or has worked in the Conservative Party will know the name of Salim, and what he stands for and how he contributes to the whole argument when it comes to politics. So I'm an evangelical Christian, and I am concerned about the future of Canada, the same as everyone else here is. And I know that Salim is a reasonable and logical thinker, and he brings a fresh breath of fresh air, I should say, to the political scene because of his acumen and his knowledge and his desire to be a Canadian, not a hyphenated Canadian, a Canadian. And his interest is in Canada first, Canada always, Canada's future, and our progeny's future. And that's my interest as a person who is now getting on in years. I'm thinking about my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. And Salim gives me the confidence that he will protect our heritage. He will ensure that the future of Canada has a chance. And I see no other way to deal with some of the issues that we have than to have a man like Salim, who cannot be called a racist, he cannot be called a bigot, he cannot be called an Islamophobe, but he can speak to all those issues that would put him in that category as far as I'm concerned. And he's the only one I know that can adequately speak to those issues. And that, for that reason, as a Christian, I feel it's a responsibility to ensure our future and that God has a plan for us. And we don't need to have everyone who thinks exactly the way we do in all matters in order to come up with the best solution for our country. And I think we've got to realize that and recognize it, that if I look at history, I look at a God who has chosen Nebuchadnezzar, who's chosen Jurius, who's chosen many other people who were not Jews, were not Christians, were pagans or what have you, to do God's work. Not that I'm saying you're a pagan, please. But I'm just saying, for the Christian mind, one has to think about the way in which God works his plans. And I believe that Salim is in that category as far as I'm concerned. So I'll leave the floor to Salim because he has much more interesting things to say than I do. Thank you, Salim.
An old saying found in a temple outside of Delhi that says that if you trace back coincidences far enough, then everything is karmic. So that is in the sense that there is no coincidence. It is all in some ways connected. We are, after all, 6 degrees of separation from each other, maybe even closer. Anyhow, thank you. Raheel has filled the space in my life as an older sister, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful to them for everything in the journey that we have been making together. And in particularly this afternoon, it was Raheel and Sohail's idea, and it is in some sense so fitting that the launch of my campaign outreach beyond my riding, which is in London North Centre, is taking place at Raheel's residence. So that is extremely significant for me. And then thank you, all of you, for taking the time to come out on a Sunday afternoon. I did not know that I was competing, or we were competing against Super Bowl, so the fact that you all chose to come out is quite indicative of how you selected your own priorities. So thank you again. And thank you to Irving, to Richard, to Susan, who is my co-chair also in London and who accompanied me. Possibly you'll hear from Susan as we go along. So without Richard, without Irving, I don't think I would be taking a stand over here this afternoon with the intention of being the nominee for the Conservative Party. for the Conservative Party in London North Centre. And hopefully, with the Lord's blessing and your support and the support of others, people who are, in a sense, waking up to where we are as a country, drifting, that I might be able to represent all of you in Ottawa. And if that were to happen, it will all have begun here with you and my friends and my well-wishers and supporters, you know. As I tell my students and I tell my friends, since we launched our campaign in London early fall, when our website went on line with the help of Irving, that this is not something that I'm playing in terms of golf, you know, trying to get a birdie. This is a team sport. If anything, I hope to be the Tom Brady of our team, you know, the quarterback this afternoon. I expect Tom Brady will win. He will be going into the Hall of Fame. I don't know what's in God's hand, but if we win, if I can be the quarterback, it will be because I will have had a very solid team around me, you know, the defense, the running backs, and so on and so forth. So, thank you. Let me, I don't want to take too much time, but let me share with you, all of you possibly know enough about me, so there's nothing that I can say that would be a revelation. But just let me add a few ideas, a few thoughts, few remarks of why and what led me into taking this step, because that's a question that invariably most people ask me when I am out in the public arena or with my students. Why are you doing this? What is your intent? What is your purpose? Well, my answer is very simple. I have been studying and I have been engaged in the life as a Canadian with Canada for the past 45 years. This is my 46th year in Canada. I came as a young man just out of my teenage years as a refugee from a war-torn country that had just gone through a genocide, the worst genocide since the Holocaust in 1971 in what is now former East Pakistan, Bangladesh. And I was fortunate enough with my family, that is my mother and sisters who followed me later on, but with my older brother coming ahead of me during the war, fortunate enough to find a home in Canada. And everything since that day on arriving in Canada has been God's blessing to me. It has made me everything what I am. I owe everything, the air I breathe, the water I drink, whatever I have achieved in life, however small and infinitesimal it is all because I am in Canada. And as a Canadian, I have reflected and thought and talked and studied. And then for the last 33 years, since 1986, I have been in London as a university professor. Some of my students have gone on to become members of parliament in Queen's Park. Some of them have gone on to play a role in Ottawa. Some of my colleagues ended up engaged in politics at the federal level. My very close colleague became the chief of staff to the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, Ian Brodie, and so on and so forth. So I have been deeply, in that sense of the term, maybe a couple of degrees removed, but engaged in the study, in the thinking, in the teaching, in the writing about issues that have deep relevance and resonance about who we are as a country and who we are as Canadians. And so, all of that, in a sense, came to a head this summer, this past summer, when I engaged with one of my former students who had been given the nomination in London West by the Conservative, the provincial Conservative. A wonderful young man, full of energy, full of enthusiasm, to be the candidate for the Conservative. And I campaigned with him door to door, and I was engaged with him right through the summer. Andrew did not win, but Andrew made a mark, and I was with him through that campaign. And it is in that campaign that I decided that I should take a stand in the public arena. I should come out in the public square. It is not something new that is entirely that I decided upon, because going back to the 1990s, I came to the attention of Preston Manning as a result of my public speaking and writing, and Preston Manning then persuaded me to seek the nomination of the Reform Party, which became the Canadian Alliance, and I did, on his encouragement, seek the nomination in London, and I was the candidate on record for the 2000 election. There's a long history about that. I won't bore you with it, but it's a fascinating history. I got involved. We didn't win. Then 9/11 happened, and I drifted away in a totally different direction. But again, as part of the direction that I felt that we in North America were under attack from the very forces that had done the genocide in 1971 in Pakistan, in former East Pakistan, a genocide that I lived through and survived, but many of my friends didn't survive, many of my family members didn't survive. So anyhow, woke up on that morning of September 11, realizing that the very forces from which many of us had fled had followed us, and we're here, right here in North America. And so from September 11, 2001, I have been very deeply engaged, both in terms of my academic work and in terms of my public work, in terms of explaining the situation in the Muslim world, what is happening in the Muslim world. I've written about it, I've published books about it, and I have participated within the Conservative Party with Raheel, with Sohail and other friends in providing whatever support we could provide when we were called upon to provide to the government, that is the government of Stephen Harper, through committee hearings, public representation, and we did our part. And so this past summer, I felt that all of that experience and understanding and engagement, I need to put it online and take a stand and come into the public square. So that is what led me into making this decision in the summer. I hope my decision has been, in my own mind, I feel that I have no reason to doubt it, but I hope it is up to the public that my decision has been one that has been taken with the seriousness that is due. It is not about a personal search for personal glory or personal benefit. It is truly, I can say with complete conviction, that it is to fight against the forces that is out to undermine what each one of us in this room, and as I go around in my writing, speaking, we treasure, but we treasure it and take it for granted, not knowing that we can also lose it, and lose it very fast. So that's why I'm running for this nomination. The Conservative Party has a huge challenge ahead as the election draws near. Just let me share very quickly my own thoughts about the 2019 election. Irving has mentioned it, that it is going to be in some ways a crossroad election. Richard has talked about it. You know, I feel that the 2019 election in some ways is possibly in Canadian history for our generation in this room as important, if not more important, than the election of 1980. Those of you who will recall, the election of 1980 was almost providential. 40 years ago, 1979, the Conservatives elected, after long years of liberal dominance, a conservative government with Joe Clark as the prime minister. But that government did not survive. It fell within 9 months on a motion, a no confidence motion, and the Liberals came back under Pierre Trudeau. But Providence has its own way of determining things or shaping things. And looking back now, some 37, 38 years later, that indeed was a providential election because of what transpired after the 1980 election, the referendum in Quebec, the debate, and it was in more ways than we can recall that if Trudeau had not been the prime minister in 1980, we might not have had the Canada that we still have today. So since 1980, there have been other challenges we have faced in Canada. We almost lost Canada in 1995. Again, most of you will recall, with barely 30,000 votes, we survived a second referendum in Quebec. The 1990s was again the struggle of Western alienation and how we're going to deal with Western alienation. That too was a separatism that was rising, but Preston Manning's leadership was about getting the West in. That too is a history that was played out. I was a foot soldier in that history, in that campaign. But the 2019 election now, in my view, is going to be as important, if not more important, to repeat myself. Why? The situation, again, is one which can only be talked about in the larger framework of where we are headed, and that's how I would frame it. Under the Liberal government, this present government, we are about to hand over Canada to become a laboratory of the globalist agenda. We have signed agreements that most Canadians don't know about. For instance, the UN Global Compact on Migration, the Paris Treaty, and other engagement through the UN that basically takes away or dilutes and blurs our sovereignty. And so we are heading in the direction that those of us who are aware in this room and who study these things can already see what is happening in Europe as a result of this pressure that is coming down upon Canada, that is the globalist agenda of a one borderless world. And if you give the Liberals 4 more years, we'll be so far down that road that it is quite possible that we will not be able to come back and reclaim our identity as a sovereign state. Okay. So that is the framework within which I look at it. And I hope more and more conservatives will look at it, that it is not a piecemeal situation of dealing with our economic issue on one side, our security and immigration issue on another side, our constitutional issue, in terms of our freedom issues, our charter right issues, the question of, for instance, Motion 103, the $600 million buyout of the Canadian media, etc. These are like dots. We have to connect the dots and see where it is. And when you connect the dot, this is the globalist agenda that this government has adopted, contrary to our closest and most important ally, that is the United States. Okay. Those are the conversations that have to take place, will possibly take place. Either it will take place during the campaign, pre-writ campaign, or when the writ is dropped, the campaign takes place. Those will be the conversation. Those are the necessary conversations. And we will be faced with the challenge of awakening Canadians to the reality of where they are and what they might lose. So I want to play a small part in that conversation. I want to play a part in which I can bring to bear my own understanding, my own values, my own study that I spent years doing, and help Canada in that struggle that I foresee is going to take place in this coming election. So those are the reasons why I decided to run. Very quickly, London North Centre is one of the 3 ridings in London. It is the main downtown riding in London. It is the riding which has the university, which has been my home for the last 34 years. It's the riding where I live. It is a riding that is now represented by the Liberals, but it is a swing riding. When the Conservatives have been in the government, London North has been a Conservative riding. So during the Mulroney years, the riding was represented by Conservative member Tom Hawkins. If anybody will remember Tom Hawkins was this member from the riding where I'm running. He was a cabinet member in the Mulroney government. During the Harper period, the riding was represented by a Conservative, Suzanne Truppe, but we lost the riding in the 2015 election. I hope to win it back for the Conservative. So, as I said, that riding is a swing riding, and in some ways, as a swing riding, it will determine who will form the government in Ottawa. If we win the riding in London North, we will form the government. If that is the historical pattern I'm talking about now. If those of you who read Conrad Black, I'm sure many of you do, last week's column in the National Post, Conrad Black devoted to the coming election, and his prediction or his assessment, his analysis was something in some way that I have been talking about with my friends and my people in London, that Ontario is going to decide the next government. The battleground is Ontario. The reasons are very simple. West of Kenora, the Rocky Mountains, Conservatives will sweep the country. We might have few seats that will be taken maybe by the NDP in places like Winnipeg Centre, but most of the seats in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, the prairie provinces in Alberta, will be swept by the Conservative. This is a no-brainer. BC is a toss-up province. I call it the Lotus Land. So BC will be divided in terms of the split. Then we look to the east. Newfoundland and Maritime, historically as dependency provinces on the receiving end of equalization payment, has been stuck with the Liberals, and they will go Liberal again. We might pick up a few seats, just as we had the seat of Peter MacKay in Nova Scotia. But in large measure, Maritime and Newfoundland will be Liberal. Then we come to Quebec. Quebec has been historically Liberal. We possibly might take 10 seats in Quebec, So the battleground, which is Ontario, 108 seats. This is where we are going to decide who will be the next government, who will be the next prime minister. If we win anywhere between 50 and 70 seats in Ontario, then you're looking at a Conservative government and the saving of Canada from drifting further and further down an irretrievable path of the globalist agenda. So that's the outline. That's Conrad Brad's thinking. I think it's the thinking of most people, that's how the things are going to be shaped. The media is against us. The national media is against us. The national media has been bought over by the recent purchase by the Liberal Party, by Justin Trudeau, with a $600 million down payment, which, by the way, is directly from the playbook of the UN Global Compact and from Agenda 2030, which has become now the playbook of the Canadian government. So the media is against us, the academia is against us, and we have basically a bureaucracy deeply entrenched in Ottawa that is driving an agenda that has less to do with Canadian interests and more to do with virtue signaling. So that's the layout. And it is in the layout we have the challenge to present our views and our position. And in terms of where I stand, which is where London North Centre is, I've been out speaking to my students. Students are, in that sense, the most important element in terms of the campaign, the volunteers, and of course, they are the future generation. Tomorrow, for instance, I'm speaking at Western to my students at their invitation on the UN Global Compact on Migration. We will be doing other discussions on the Middle East, on the UN Agenda 2030, and so on. So we have to reach the people, and we have to frame the people the question that I have just shared with you. The framing of the issue is very simple. Are we going to remain a country? Are we going to stand for Canada? Are we devoted to our nationalist agenda between three oceans and the longest undefended border in the world and build upon it? Or are we going to surrender our interests, our history, our tradition to the unelected voices and intellects and bureaucrats in Geneva, in Davos, in New York? The choice is yours. Thank you.